The Sacramento Kings and De'Aaron Fox are officially heading for a split. Where does Fox want to go, and will he get his wish? Plus, the Miami Heat are opening the door to more offers for Jimmy Butler. Could they get a call from one of Butler's former teams? And Bronny James gets his first serious minutes for the Lakers. That's all today on Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On NBA. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is sponsored by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. I'm Doug Branson, host of the Locked On Hornets podcast, and I'll be your shot clock Sherpa, guiding you through the NBA's biggest stories with the help of Locked On's local experts. And with me are two of Locked On's premier national NBA experts from the Locked On Nuggets podcast and senior NBA writer for the Action Network. We've got Matt Moore. And from the Locked On Bulls podcast, we've got Hayes. Matt and Hayes, we have got a ton to get to. A lot happened yesterday. In fact, some stuff had to hit the cutting room floor. We had Dillon Brooks and Trae Young trying to choke each other out in a game between the Hawks and the Rockets, and we can't even get to it. We don't even have time for that because there's so much going on. And I know how desperately Matt would like to talk about that. Maybe we touch on it tomorrow. But first, the big story yesterday, according to a number of reports, including from ESPN's Shams Charania and The Athletic's Sam Amick, the Sacramento Kings are exploring trade options for De'Aaron Fox after Fox made it clear to the team that he does not intend to sign an extension with the Kings. Fox's preference is to be traded to the San Antonio Spurs, reportedly, to play alongside Victor Wembanyama. First question, I think, is the obvious question, like how tantalizing is a De'Aaron Fox and Victor Wembanyama pair up, Matt?
I mean, look, Fox's speed, his defense, his outside shooting, which he's developed so much over the last two seasons, you pair that with Wembanyama, and then you start looking at stuff like, man, you could have Wemby, Fox, and Castle. Like, that's a really great combo going forward. He fits a little bit better with the timeline. He's entering his prime, but Wemby's is going to accelerate so much. It's a great combo. I've never really seen Fox with I think maybe early in his career with that kind of a lob threat. So I'm curious to see how that's going to work out. But man, it is a great pairing. It's a great combo in terms of the speed and everything else.
So Matt mentions Stephon Castle in that combo, but would it require moving on from Stephon Castle? Like, how realistic is a deal between the Kings and the Spurs to make this happen, Hayes?
That was going to be my question, because I think that the Kings are probably going to want Stephon Castle back unless they just like in love with like a Devin Vassell or a Keldon Johnson. So I don't know if Castle will be part of that, but regardless of not, like just being able to put De'Aaron Fox with Wemby, that as a 1-2 punch, I think that would be fun. And yeah, the Spurs, we talked about it many times that they don't necessarily have to rush to try to do anything. They're ahead of schedule regardless. But when a player like this becomes available, and if he wants to come to your team to play with Wemby, I think you got to do what it takes to bring him in here, because I love Castle. I think Castle has tremendous upside. But even if it takes Castle, who's to say that he's going to turn out to be as good as De'Aaron Fox? And then now you have something as a 1-2 punch now, where you are now expected in seasons going forward to be competing for playoff spots. And I think that's also a tandem and a pairing other players would want to come play with. And then you're off to the races. Now we just got to get Pop back.
Yeah, but like that's the thing is, so the report was that he's told other suitors, don't even make a play. Don't even, he's got where he wants to go. And respect it. Like, he's pulling the same card that so many other guys, including Jimmy, have done, right? The Spurs finally get to be on this side of it, where they get to be like, well, no, sorry, Castle's off the board. Like, no, like we're not giving you Castle. But Keldon Johnson, Devin Vassell, Jeremy Sohan, on down the line, got a bunch of picks. We could set you up. I think that they're in a position where they don't have to just give up whatever. They don't have to be desperate here. And that's a pretty rare and advantageous position for a small market team adding a star.
Make sure to check out Locked On Spurs. They've got an emergency episode out right now profiling this news. But I want to shift gears over to the Kings' perspective on this. Let's go to Matt George from Locked On Kings for more.
Sacramento Kings fired Mike Brown without consulting De'Aaron Fox, without talking to him. That was well reported. That's strike one. Strike two is after Mike Brown was fired, Fox wore the majority of the blame, while the general manager and assistant general manager here in Sacramento hid and did not hold a press conference to answer questions, to take responsibility on themselves and off of their star player. Fox is number one in this team's history, in my opinion, of homegrown talent. You trade De'Aaron Fox away to come by here. That doesn't mean that you don't trade him out of fear, but that's something to keep in mind. If you're going for a combination of players, which is pretty much what you have to go for, because you're not going to get a better play in the deal. The Kings are not trading De'Aaron Fox and getting a better player.
Hayes, do you feel for Sacramento's fan base, and how should they feel about the people that are in charge of the team after all of this news dropped?
Absolutely feel for their fan base. They were actually building something in Sacramento. You Light the Beam was a thing. Like, they were getting some excitement in there for what that team was able to do. And this season already started off at like a disappointing point for them based off where they thought they'd be coming into the season, based off how they finished last season, right? So those things, the fan base has already gone through something. And yeah, the people in charge running this organization, I'd have a lot of serious questions about what are we doing here with everything that's kind of happened in a condensed amount of time around this team. It just seemed like they went from a team that had a direction to now they're directionless once again. And we've been here with Sacramento fans. And so if I was a member of that fan base as a fan of a directionless franchise myself, I would be extremely frustrated.
It's just sad, man. Like, they deserve so much better. Those fans fought so hard to keep that team. They love that team. Yeah. And they can't, and like, this has been coming for a while. We were talking about it for months, that this was probably going to be how this ended up. I think one of the problems too is they tied themselves to Sabonis and DeRozan. So now, as Matt kind of alluded to, you have to try and get players back. You can't even do the fun thing, which is like, all right, we're going to trade him, but we're going to get like a bunch of young talent and we're going to start over and we'll get in the lottery. And you can't do that. Like, you have to try and piece together like the Hoopers version here with Sabonis and Fox and trying to figure something out here. It's just a brutal situation. I just think it sucks for them. I do think that the Kings owner, like front office, has done a pretty good job. It's not their fault that Fox reached this point in his career. Most players do when they get to this point in their careers. This isn't a Kings problem. This is pretty consistent. It just sucks that they're going to lose the one guy that was kind of homegrown for them.
All right, we got some breaking news just as we were going to tape out of Atlanta that actually could complicate a Fox to Spurs deal. Hawks forward Jalen Johnson will be out for the remainder of the season after having surgery on a torn labrum. The Hawks have every incentive to keep driving towards the postseason because they actually don't own their first-round pick in the upcoming draft. The San Antonio Spurs do, and if the Kings demand that pick, it would certainly be much tougher to let go in light of this news. Matt, how big of a loss is Jalen to what the Hawks have managed to do this season?
He's their best player. I know Trae Young's great. I know he is. Jalen Johnson's their best player, and this sucks. It hurts their playoff chances. It hurts their play-in chances. It hurts the development of Dyson Daniels. It hurts the development of Zachary Risache. It hurts Trae Young. Like, this just sucks. And I hate that this happened. Johnson was going to be a serious most improved player candidate, and he'll bounce back from this. Labrums are okay as far as recovery long term. There's no like big long term concern here, but I do think it's like it's just a really bummer of an end. And look, that pick situation is fraught too. It's getting to be scary times here for the Hawks.
Yeah, this is ugly for the Hawks. I mean, Jalen Johnson is so good for them on both sides of the ball. He's the bright spot of that team, him and Dyson Daniels. I'm not the biggest Trae Young guy, but I do love Jalen Johnson for who he's becoming in this league because he's still not done growing as a player either. So, yeah, this sucks for them. And they already have lost 6 in a row. And Philly's won 3 in a row. I would not be surprised if they end up falling out.
Doug, I just had an idea. All right. Fox to San Antonio. Okay. San Antonio sends the pick back. The Hawks send Trae Young to the Kings.
Whoa. I don't hate it. I don't know. I had to think about that one. But I don't, that might be an interesting idea. Let us know what you think on YouTube, youtube.com/@LockedOnNBA. We're not done talking about the trade deadline. Coming up on Locked On NBA, more news out of Miami. They are opening the door to more options on a Jimmy Butler deal, and possibly maybe a return for Butler to one of his old teams. We'll tell you who coming up on Locked On NBA. Today's episode of Locked On NBA is brought to you by Game Time. Attending NFL playoff games is an unforgettable experience that brings fans together. I still remember what it felt like to watch my Carolina Panthers win the NFC Championship at home. Chills. I'm looking forward to making more memories like that with the help of Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for events even easier. It filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so that you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Browsing through the deals is simple, and you will find great value for all kinds of seats around the venue. The Super Deal is especially impressive, offering the best value for any event. The app's features like seat views before you buy and all-in pricing with no surprise fees at checkout make the experience smooth and reliable. Plus, the on-time ticket delivery and lowest price guarantee give you peace of mind. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account. Use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. More Locked On NBA ahead. Thanks for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. Maybe it's your first watch on YouTube. Your favorite NBA team has a free and daily newsletter as well. Go to LockedOnDaily.com. Subscribe and stay up to date with local expert analysis and amazing writing from Katie Heindel, Mike Shear, and Locked On Fantasy Basketball tips from Josh Lloyd. Jimmy Butler is suspended indefinitely, and the Heat are reportedly loosening the requirements for a deal. Let's go to Locked On Heat for the latest.
The Heat have reportedly lowered their asking price for Jimmy Butler and are taking calls from teams other than the Phoenix Suns. Teams like the Milwaukee Bucks and the Memphis Grizzlies continue to be mentioned as potential suitors, and the Heat have reportedly loosened their stance on what they want in a Butler deal. The Heat had previously been looking for good role players who can help them win now, draft capital, and they did not want to take back any salary beyond 2026. But now they might be open to deals that don't fall within those parameters.
I think from Miami's perspective, you can't afford to give up on acquiring players that can help this team win now, because you have to be in the playoff hunt, and you also have to acquire draft capital. If there's anything, if you wind up getting salary back that might be able to dip into that 2026 era, that doesn't work. Like, you can already start clearing. You can clear the books next year. You can clear the books at some other point down the road. Kick that can down till some other time. But you need to be able to get something of someone of value that can help this team this year, and also draft capital. I think that's the most important thing.
Okay, Matt Hayes, we've seen Milwaukee's name jump back into the fray, Memphis as well, but could Jimmy Butler be on his way to a reunion with Joel Embiid in Philadelphia? It's not out of the question, according to Yahoo's Vince Goodwill, who said on his Good Word podcast, quote, "I've heard that Philly quietly could be a suitor for Jimmy Butler. Theoretically, it would be a Jimmy for Paul George swap. I believe that Embiid is pushing for them to reacquire Jimmy." Hayes, what are your thoughts on a potential reunion for Butler and Philly, and what do you think ultimately pushes a Butler deal over the finish line for Miami?
I think Joel Embiid is in the spot that a lot of us have been in our lives, where we're going through a little bit of a turmoil, a little bit of a rough time, and we sit back and we think about, when's the last time things looked a little bit good? And I think that you think back on exes sometimes at that point in time. And I think that's what Joel, he maybe looked at a picture, maybe looked at some old video, a highlight or something, and saw Jimmy Butler and said, you know what? Maybe we can get the show back on the road. Maybe we can try to do this again. And usually that never works out. Now, in a case like this, Paul George hasn't been quite what the Philadelphia 76ers hoped that he was going to be, but he's playing a lot better now. Over the last 10 games, he's averaging 20 points per game, 44% shooting from three, 47% shooting from the field, 5 assists, 6 rebounds almost. Like, he's playing more like the Paul George you thought you were going to get. You know what also Paul George is? He's not disruptive. I don't know why Joel Embiid would want Jimmy Butler back. I guess I can get and see some part of it, but I think in the age that Joel Embiid is in, we all start realizing you don't go backwards. It's not ever anything going backwards. Don't call your ex. Put down the phone, Joel. Put the phone down.
That was dynamite. We got to clip that. That was great stuff. I have so many things I want to get to here. First, Hayes has me imagining Joel Embiid in the Wolverine meme with him holding up a photo of Jimmy Butler. Second, so Miami's thing is that they don't want to take money back. They're gearing up for the 2026 free agency. Like, it is very easy to look at a number of things and reports, and you get that's the thing that slips under the radar and all these things is the Heat want to clear the decks for 2026 because they want to do another decision, like go out and grab a big free agent, right? So the team that keeps coming back up in these conversations that I think has been on the phone pretty consistently with the Heat is the Milwaukee Bucks. Paul George to Milwaukee, the pieces to Miami, Jimmy Butler to Philadelphia. Also, my last thing in response to Hayes' thing, why does Joel Embiid want Jimmy Butler? Well, Jimmy got his coach fired the last time. So maybe that's what he's hoping for, is he's hoping to go ahead and bring on Jimmy to go ahead and take out Nick Nurse here as well.
All right, so we're almost a week out from the deadline, and there are a lot of teams with problems to solve. And one of the teams that we've talked about often on this show is the Minnesota Timberwolves. Let's check in with Ben Beacon, who runs down the likelihood of a major shakeup in Minnesota.
Deal would obviously be a big one. You know, I saw Jeremy Grant floated. I think actually that may have been an idea that Dukowitz had on Friday. Perhaps that's a possibility, but it's just pretty unlikely that they do anything because it has to be somebody has to be interested in acquiring Julius Randle as well. And maybe there's fear that he picks up his player option. You got to pay him $31 million next year, or maybe a team's worried he's going to opt out. Like, the player option really complicates things. And especially now that the Wolves offense has been better since the first of the year, Randle's like fit a little bit better. This team's trending in the right direction. They're very likely going to be a top 5 seed in the West. I believe that. Like, at this point, you just play it out. If Randle opts in, you can always trade him in the offseason. If he opts out, you can let him walk, or you can re-sign him, hopefully not at a crazy deal. But I would be pretty surprised if they traded Julius Randle at this point.
I feel like Ben is underselling the idea of a Randle trade for the Wolves, but Matt Hayes, you can let me know what you think about that. I also want to know what's the most interesting team or storyline as we approach that 1 week until the deadline. Is it Minnesota, or is it a team like Toronto in a sort of will they, won't they pivot to winning situation? Matt, what do you think?
You know, on the Randle front, I mean, I think Ben's probably on target here, where I think there's interest from the Wolves in moving Randle. That's been kind of making the rounds this week. That's something I picked up on from a couple of people, is there is a sense that, yeah, Minnesota's like, this is not working. We probably need to move it. And if you want to know, like, why would they be so urgent? Look, I'm not trying to be this guy. I don't want to be this guy. I just said it sucks what's happening with Fox. What do you think happens if the Wolves have a disappointing exit and they go out in the play-in, or they go out in the first round? How does Anthony Edwards, given his comments this year, how does he respond to that this summer? You're on it, like, Ant does not seem patient. And so I get concerned there. The most interesting team, I think, is Toronto. They've got Bruce Brown, Kelly Olynyk. They've got different pieces they can kind of maneuver here. And they've been mentioned in so many 3-team deals. Mark Stein had a thing yesterday about them potentially getting in on Brandon Ingram. My question is, because there is some talk about them potentially being involved in a Warriors Heat 3-way deal for Jimmy Butler, where the Raptors would take Wiggins. I don't think the Raptors want Wiggins, despite him, the Canadian connection. I think they use Wiggins and then try and go after another guy. What if they went after Zion? What if that's the move? You swap out pieces you don't really care about in terms of Bruce Brown and other pieces, like not assets you're tied to. You get a piece that you can then attach to move and take a swing on a guy like Zion Williamson. This is my new thing that I'm like pitching out there this week as I try and somehow blindly predict a trade, Hayes.
I mean, hey, if you hit on predicting the trade like that with the swings that you're making now, that would be absolutely crazy. And I think at that point, everybody who throws any shade towards Matt Moore needs to just wear a Matt Moore t-shirt and shut up. How about that? I think that needs to happen for a lot of people. But as far as listen, if they could swing Julius Randle, great. I'm not as optimistic as Matt Moore. I think they're going to be stuck here.
So where do you put the likelihood of there? Because I've seen a lot of trade scenarios where a team that has a problem, whether it's Butler or Randall or what have you, or maybe now, and you can add Fox and Sacramento into this. I've seen a lot of trades that involve another team helping that team out with the problem, maybe getting a third team involved to facilitate that. But what's the likelihood that we see a multi-team deal that solves multiple problems in that deal, like Minnesota, Miami, Golden State gets involved somehow to figure out all of these problems?
I mean, it's possible, but the problem is just like the issue is not trying to get the teams; it's the owners. That's in the conversations I've had. That's where these things fall apart. Like there was a pretty substantial framework that I've kind of hinted at on the show a while back, and what I was told is that fell apart in large part because ownership was like, nope, not interested. And that's the problem here is like you'll get through this entire process and you'll figure out the cap machinations under this new nonsense CBA, and you'll get everybody in a place where they've got the salary that they're willing to take back and the assets they're willing to take back, and it solves these problems. And then one owner at the last second is like, I thought about it and I really don't want to turn it down. Like that's always gonna be the problem. There's too many people you have to get on board for those types of deals, including big name agents and a lot of power brokers. And that to me is why these deals rarely happen.
All right, coming up on Locked On NBA, we mentioned the Philadelphia 76ers. They're actually on a surprising win streak, even without Paul George, who has been sitting with a pinky injury. So we'll dig into that. Plus, Bronny James getting serious minutes for the first time with the Los Angeles Lakers. How did he do, and how did Lakers fans react? We'll have more of that coming up. Thanks again for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. The Philadelphia 76ers are on a surprise 3-game winning streak, including wins over the Cavaliers and the Los Angeles Lakers, despite Paul George going back on the injury list with a pinky finger issue. What's behind the turnaround? Let's go to Keith Pompey and Kayla Santiago of Locked On 76ers recapping their 118-104 win over the Lakers.
Last night, the Lakers used 5 different defensive coverages against Maxey, and none of them worked. And he was knocking down threes. He was just blowing past people. It was a great performance to him, and he was just being aggressive from the start. And the crazy thing is, the guy, in his opinion, who is the greatest player of all time, LeBron James, came to town, and Maxey outshined LeBron.
Tyrese Maxey is officially back right now. I mean, you're looking at a player that struggled down the stretch a little bit in some games, that, was taking some crazy shots, going through a crazy season mentally, emotionally, trying to rally this team together. It can't be easy when everybody else is saying, oh, the 76ers should tank. Tyrese Maxey is showing not only that he believes that they can win some games, but he also believes in this team that they can have some sort of push, and they're not a team that's going to tank.
Tyrese Maxey, 43 points on 26 field goal attempts, 58% from the field. It was quite a performance. Let's do a mini game of sus or sustainable here. Should this mini run incentivize the Philadelphia 76ers to do something at the deadline and get on the play-in dance floor? Hayes, we'll start with you.
Oh man, I don't know if they necessarily have to do anything at the trade deadline. I think they just need to try to get healthy and get all on the right page. Like the Philadelphia 76ers still are that team that still can be a version of that team that I think a lot of people saw them being coming into this league, where they can compete. Like they should be better than the Bulls. They should be better than the Atlanta Hawks, even when the Hawks they should be better than these teams. So if they want to make a deal to kind of solidify that, great. They got some flexibility to do so in. But I think ultimately, if they could just get and finally stay healthy, they're right there. And I don't know if they're going to rise up enough to avoid the play-in. So I don't think they should take too big of a swing, just wait till the offseason. But they're right there, especially now with the injury to Jalen Johnson, to where the play-in is a real possibility for them.
Doug, I want to ask your opinion on this. Do you think Paul George can get back to a place where he can be like a meaningful playoff contributor? Like, can he get his season back on track? He shot poorly. He's had these injury issues in and out. Can Paul George be a plus in the playoffs? Can he have this series, a first round where like, Paul George, can he do that?
Yeah, that was always the interesting question with him moving to Philadelphia with, assuming that there was going to be a healthy team. He seemed to be the kind of player that everyone pegged as the guy who would sacrifice a little bit and then come up big in certain playoff moments. So I would say yes, in certain opportunities, but they were never real. The idea was never to really depend on him for multiple playoff games of like max Paul George effectiveness, right?
Yeah. And so I think it's like, I don't think that there's a good answer here. I think Hayes is probably right that it's like, look, they can just keep going and probably make the play-in. They had a terrible start to the season. They dug out of the hole. They're back within range of that. I don't think a trade, it's like they could get there. They just pull off a trade. It's like, no, they can get there. They just stop playing like dog crap. Like just stop playing terribly. And then you can probably get there because the rest of that middle of the Eastern Conference is pretty close to dog crap. So I think it's that to me is kind of more the equation here. But I do think it's like, look, the Sixers are somehow, they're Schrodinger Sixers. They're neither dead nor alive.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. So let's move to the Lakers part of this. They lose this game. They're sort of still in this. Speaking of Schrodinger, they're sort of in this limbo as well of games where they look excellent and then games where they sort of slip on the banana peel. But Bronny James was the story in this one. He got his first extensive time with the Los Angeles Lakers, been playing well in the G League, got some time here on a nationally televised game, but fell flat. 0 points, 0 for 5 from the field, 3 rebounds, 3 turnovers. After the game, JJ Redick said that he may have put Bronny in a tough spot. Do you agree with that, Matt, or is that just excuse-making for Bronny's sake?
Before I say this, Bronny James is a professional basketball player. He's going to be a professional basketball player somewhere in the world if he chooses to be so for a long time. And playing on the road versus NBA defenses with the kind of attention that he has just by his name value, I think is really tough, and it's a very tough situation. All that said, you know what the tough situation that JJ Redick put him in? He played him in an NBA game. Doesn't belong there. Like that's just it. Like he just doesn't belong there, and that's okay. That doesn't need to be this massive failure, but maybe this turns around. Maybe he has moments. Maybe his career, maybe he has a Jeremy Lin type awakening. Maybe something wild happens. But for me, I'm just like, why are we trying to make this into a thing? Until he shows consistently that he is that guy in other G League, Summer League environments, we got to stop trying to make this into a thing, Hayes.
Okay, let me preface because I'm about to say some things that I know is going to hurt some people's feelings. But let me preface this by saying,
clear out
first off, that Bronny James is a player that needs development, and I want to be clear on that. But let's be clear here. I'm going to be real for a second, and I hope this doesn't get me in trouble with Locked On. Bronny James is living the best make-a-kid-wish dream of all time. He did not deserve to be drafted into the NBA. He was not ready to go into the NBA when he was. He had the storyline the whole first week of the season, him getting on the court with his dad. He got to have that moment. People talked about it as if it was something more special than what it is. Bronny James needs to go somewhere and focus on development and trying to become an actual NBA player. He's not an NBA player. He's not even close to being an NBA player yet. And the sad part about this is everybody else saw it. And the one team that wanted to take him to actually develop him in the way that he probably needs to be to actually turn into an NBA player, they were turned off by his agent and by LeBron so that he can go to the Lakers and they can have this storyline. Right now, Bronny James is a storyline. So no wonder, let them do whatever, because nobody right now, it seems like, is really truly invested in being real with this kid and developing him to what he needs to do to be able to sniff any type of success in the NBA. It's so silly to me. It's downright. We talk about nepotism in the league. It's cool. It's all throughout the league. But this is just, it's silly. It's stupid. And I'm over it.
All right. Sometimes the NBA's storylines and the images that we actually get on the floor, sometimes they converge in a really interesting way. And I thought that happened last night in that game when Bronny gets out on the run in transition and has his shot blocked by Philadelphia 76er. I believe it was Adam Bona. And and trailing the play is his dad, LeBron James, who like runs into the back of Bronny and is just obviously like physically towering over him. Bronny literally in the shadow of his father on a play in which he had his shot absolutely denied. It was just one of those weird moments in the NBA that where storyline and everything sort of converge.
I have a lot of sympathy for the kid, and ultimately it's like, look, he's making millions of dollars to hang out with his dad and play professional basketball. It's a pretty charmed life, but I just hope that he is able to block out everything so that this doesn't wind up affecting, his quality of life.
All right, last thing, we've got some great games tonight, pretty long slate of NBA games, a lot to choose from. I want to put the microscope on the Knicks and the Nuggets. So we've got Denver visiting the Garden. The Knicks have won 4 straight. The Nuggets have lost a couple of games in a row, gave up nearly 130 points to the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Chicago Bulls. My question is, Matt, can the Knicks put 150 on the Nuggets in regulation tonight?
Why do you think it's only going to be 150? That's my question. The Nuggets defense has been absolutely atrocious these last couple of games. They don't have any sort of contest. They've shown no effort. If Joker in that last game versus the Bulls was like not even attempting to guard Vooch on the perimeter. And it's like, well, Vooch went 2 of 9. Yeah, but you know what happened was Christian Brown had to help over because he was wide open, which meant that they were able to swing the ball and create corner 3 after corner 3 because Joker wouldn't step up in coverage. He does that versus Cat. Cat's going to go for 60 a night on his own. So yeah, they can put up 150 a night.
All right, Hayes, last word. Anything else fans should be watching for on a big league pass slate? Your Chicago Bulls at the Boston Celtics tonight.
No, I wouldn't even put nobody up to that. I got to watch that. I don't want anybody else to have to suffer through what that game could look like. But
Bulls are winning.
They may. We beat Boston before, but we're missing Zach, and I don't know if Kobe's playing yet, but it's going to be a fun game to watch. I'm watching, for some reason, I'm enticed by this Minnesota-Phoenix game tonight. I think both these teams are teams that are trying to get things together, and I just think this is going to be a fun, competitive game between two struggling teams.
Well, and you wonder what Phoenix is going to look like in the wake of this deal possibly for Butler falling apart. Like, what do they do? How do they adjust? Do they make a small move? I think that's going to be an interesting game. Two teams with big question marks. Heading into the deadline, this show will be covering the trade deadline very closely in the week ahead. If you like what you heard today, subscribe to Locked On NBA wherever you get podcasts. That includes YouTube. Thanks so much for making Locked On NBA your first listen. Thanks to Matt and Hayes for covering for me yesterday and for all of the expertise that they share on this show. Enjoy tonight's action. Be kind to each other, and we'll see you right back here on Thursdays. Locked On NBA.